best way to use data to tell a story is with a compelling visualization. So I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite JavaScript libraries to make these sorts of visualizations. It's called D3. My name is Kevin Lubick. I work at the Chapel Hill office here at Google, and I've used D3 to build visualizations to help our team be more productive. Let's take a look at what other people have used D3 for right off the bat. So this is a chloropleth map of the United States showing unemployment by zones. As it turns out with D3, this is like 50 lines of code to put together. D3 is really expressive in that regard, that you can make something that's this complex and detailed with relative ease. And what's important for software engineering is that this is fairly maintainable, readable, and easy to tell what's going on. For me, that's a big deal, maintainability. They also have these sorts of fun graphs. This is a force-directed graph, so I can grab any of these nodes, drag it around. It's interactive. This is showing the characters of Les Mis, see how they're related on stage and whatnot. And this is pretty straightforward. You just tell them the relationship between two characters, and it uses a little bit of a physics engine to try to show you the clicks in your data set. Very, very handy for trying to find those patterns. This is our status page for Skia. I helped redesign this to use D3. This is showing all of the various correctness tests and the status of those on all our Android and iOS and Windows and Linux bots. Without D3, this took 5 seconds or so to render. In D3, we got it down to 300 milliseconds or so for a large amount of data here. And the last example I'm going to show, this kind of interesting graph called What Makes Us Happy. We've got well-being on the y-axis and various things on the x-axis. For example, this is GDP. If we go ahead and pick something like alcohol consumption, we see very different trends going on there. And this is with European data. And you can go ahead and mouse over just to see what's what, and click over here to load different data sets to see what's going on. Working hours, as it turns out, surprising negative correlation. Nope, unsurprising negative correlation there. So D3 is really darn cool. I think pretty easy to go for. Take your data and put it into a visualization. And I want to show you, give you enough information so that you can leave here knowing a bit about D3, knowing how to use D3, and be able to look on the web for more details and hopefully build really cool visualizations. This entire thing focuses around D3's primary workflow of select, enter, exit, and update. And if that doesn't really make sense at the moment, I hope that it makes more sense by the end of the talk. So let's go back to that correlation graph just for a minute. How was D3 able to, just at a click of a button, change from one of the data sets to another? And there was really cool animations going on. That's really exciting. How does that work? Well, when the data comes in, each of the data points is created once during the enter-exit cycle. Makes pretty straightforward there with the name. And then they are painted and moved around during the updates. And in fact, when the data changes, the update is where they're going to be redrawn and moved around. But this only works because of the most important and possibly hardest to understand part, the select. Conceptually, you can kind of think of the select as binding our data to some abstract notions of what elements you want to create. We're building SVG here, so inside an SVG we'll have circle elements and text elements and line elements and all that cool stuff. And during the select, we're kind of making a mapping between our data points and what will be seen. And then during the enter and exit, we're going to create them, and during update, we're going to style and move them around. Let's look through a little bit more concrete of an example here. So I'm taking a subset of this data. You'll see that in the upper right-hand corner. It's just got a country name, and an X and Y. I've made it up just so it's just for the sake of the example. And we're starting off with our basic visualization building block, just an SVG. Quick side note, you can use this like we did on the status page to use arbitrary HTML, like divs, and style them how you like. D3 can work for both that and SVGs. Really cool. So SVG, all right, yeah, we got our base SVG. It's called viz. So to get started, we're going to tell D3 where our visualization is going to be. That's the first select there, start in the viz. We're going to select, this is the binding, where we're binding our data to those abstract notion of circle elements. Right now we have no circle elements created, we only have data. And this selection kind of looks a little bit something like this. Just a little bit of notation. I've got selection on the far left. The elements that are currently bound to the data are in the purple boxes, and then on the far right, it's the data themselves. Right now, we actually haven't rendered anything, so we just have the data bound to some placeholder elements. Let's go ahead and fill in those placeholder elements. I'm going to make a subselection of our data, where the enter selection. This basic, it doesn't look like a subset because we haven't had anything drawn. Basically, the enter selection says, hey, for anything that I haven't rendered an element for, but I have data for, select that, which in our case is everything at the moment. And then I'm going to append a circle for each one of those brand new elements. So this is going to create a circle. There's no styling, no location yet. We're getting there in a moment. And we're actually going to do that using some attribute functions. And so I'm going to say the center X and the center Y are based off of this function. And the first argument actually to those functions is all of our individual data points. So it's really handy. We can just say, well, for the center X, use the X that's in my data. And for the center Y, I can use the Y that's in my data. And D3 will style all of our circles exactly as we asked it to. All right, so good so far. Let's see what happens. Oh, and this is a really good example of the select, the enter and exits, and the update. So this workflow gives us a lot of mileage, and it's a really good way to structure our code for maintainability and understanding. Let's take it one step further. I've gone ahead and added 2 more data points there at the bottom for France and Italy. And let's run the exact same code, just see what's different, what's going on this time. So I make the select all and bind our data to our elements. It goes ahead and finds the data or the circles that it's already rendered, and it rebinds them very nicely to the data that we already have. And it's created 2 new placeholders using the enter that I did before. I just want to focus on the placeholder elements that we haven't rendered yet. Go ahead and stamp in a circle element, and then go ahead and style that appropriately. All right, that's a pretty good flow on D3, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit just to see what happens. So I've gone ahead and I've removed Spain and I've changed our XY. This would be the equivalent of clicking a new data set. Let's see what happens here. So I go ahead and make my selection, everything, that's very similar to before. But there's actually a subtle bug here in what's going on. The data and the elements not quite bound correctly. So Norway is bound to the circle of Spain. And this would look quite unusual for our users to have the yellow circle of Spain now is suddenly related to Norway. So what's going on here? Basically, D3 didn't know how to bind our data. Well, as it turns out, this is actually the default behavior of D3. It assumes that the order of your input data is the order that you always want your data points to be in, which I found in practice to not always be the case. So let's go ahead and explicitly tell D3, no. This is how you bind my data. And so we're back in the data function here. I'm going to tell it, all right, for the data points, my data have names. So use their name to uniquely identify the data points. And if they come in a different order, don't worry about that, just you use the names as I specified. And you'll see that in our selection, it is now figured out, oh yeah, Norway is now our second data point. Spain, I don't have anything for, and that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and actually delete that Spain circle. And this is going to use the opposite of our enter selection, the exit selection. So it looks for anything that has an element whose data has disappeared. And typically on exit, you want to remove, just get rid of the element that was there. And then finally, we're running the exact same styling as before to update our points, and they will move appropriately. So let's actually take a demo of what's going on here. This is everything up till this point. So we start at data set 1 with the 3 points, then 2 more come in, and then they shuffle around a bit. Well, that looks okay, but that really doesn't have the panache of a really cool visualization. So I'm going to go ahead and add in, what can really make a visualization stand out: animations. Now, when I first got into JavaScript and HTML stuff, I tried to do animations kind of by myself. Imagine what type of JavaScript it takes to move points from in a smooth fashion, to ease them in and ease them out, and oh my gosh, doing that in just JavaScript is kind of a pain. Not so in D3. Let's take a look at all that it would take to animate the points so that they'll move from one of their coordinates to another in a nice, smooth fashion. All you need to add is tell it to transition, and then specify how long you want that to take. And let's go ahead. I'll show you the taking these out of order briefly. I'm going to jump down to show you what just adding those 2 lines of code can really do. So we start off at 1 there. I go ahead and I've set it up so that the elements fade in, and that they fade in and out and move to their positions. And D3 is smart enough so that if your user clicks really fast, it doesn't get confused. It'll stop the current animation and continue. So yeah, let's take a look at the code that takes. So we've already seen the animation between 2 points. Just tell it there's a transition, how long it takes. To fade in, we have the elements when they're created on enter start at opacity 0, and then during our update, we have them go to opacity 1. Fade out very similarly. We tell them fade to opacity 0 and then go away. So that's what it takes to animate a D3 visualization. Any questions on the data binding, on the visualizations? I've got links to the slides and the code. If anyone is interested. Yes?
As far as, like you said, readability and maintainability, do you handle your binding and animation in separate spaces?
So yeah, I do the. Yeah, I like to set it up, basically in the select enter update. So the select. Let's actually pull up the full code here, and we can kind of see how I've structured it. So this is just a GitHub gist. I'll blow up the size here in a minute. So this is my redraw, and so I go ahead and do the data binding up above. Sometimes I'll leave myself a comment as to what I'm binding to where, or I'll even pull it out as a separate function, the data binding function. And then I do my point creation. That's here in the select, the enters, and then I transition out, and then here's my update. So, as far as readability, if you know the D3 setup coming into this, you'd be like, oh, perfect. That's how it's laid out. Yes, sorry.
It seemed to me when you started out that update and exit enter were 2 separate things.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem like the update has its own. Like you had function for enter and exit. Is there a function for update?
Yes. So the question is, why isn't there a function or something for update? That really confused me too when I was starting off with D3, because the select has its function and the enter has its function. For some design reason, there is no update function. It's literally anything else you do that's not on an enter, an exit, or a select. Um, which when I was first learning it, I was like, why is there no update? Where is the update? So that's a great question. I kind of wish there was something you could just specify, but I think in practice the closest one is sometimes if you're looking for transition. The transition usually signifies some updates of some kind.
So in terms of the maps and whatnot, I mean, are there libraries that you're pulling from to like cross correlate what data you have with zip codes and regions on a map? And
So
what are some of the base templates that you can use to add data to?
So I guess the question is, what comes in the box to help make this happen for
Right.
D3? So
yeah, and then what you can add, what can you add on, and the mechanism to do so.
So D3 comes with a lot. So like I said, this was 50 lines of code. So D3 comes with a bunch of scaling for sizing things up. It comes for mapping. It's got a GeoPackage, that comes with the various maps, and then so to bind to that, you basically you create it, tell it your scales, and then down here you do the appending. And it also comes with a lot of cool tools for importing CSVs and JSON. That comes with D3. So point it at a server URL, format it how you like, and then go ahead and render it.
Can you hook into ISRI data?
ISRI data? I'm not sure what ISRI data is.
It's GIS data.
I would have no.
As long as there's APIs.
You can convert shape files to GeoJSON files, and then they're usable in JavaScript.
Yeah, so it seems like there is some conversion. I have not done too much with the geodata, but there's a lot of examples in the D3 gallery of exactly that.
Did you play around with anything else? Did you like look into Kibana or?
Have I looked at Kibana? I have not. This was something I was familiar with from a prior project, but I have not used Kibana at all. Quick anecdote about D3 and prior experience. I feel like the best way to learn D3 is to screw up with it about 2 or 3 times. My first 2 goes at it, I learned a lot, but like at the end, I look at that code today and I cringe because I'm like, oh, I didn't understand select, enter, update then. But like now I do, and that's kind of why I wanted to give this talk. There was a lot of leaps in understanding that I had while messing up D3, and I'm hoping to impart some of that knowledge onto y'all so you don't have to screw up nearly as many times as I did.
The links again, so if people want to click at the gallery or the.
Perfect. Yes. So, and as it turns out, the author has written several blog posts that I've linked here. Mike Bostock is the guy who is kind of the man behind D3. And these blog posts in particular really helped me solidify my understanding with D3. They're a little hard to find, but once you find them, you're like, this is it. This is what I was looking for. Yes.
You had a presentation earlier on
Yes.
was that? I mean, how long did that?
To develop? So I was porting it from an older one that was using Polymer, and I think it took 2 days or so, mainly because there's a lot of nuanced things like if you mouse over here, it highlights when the change got reverted. If you click on things, it needs to update. being able to style it. As it turns out, I think like the CSS styling and whatnot is what takes the last 80% of the time. Make it look nice. But I think I remember it being about 2 days.
Is your goal to make it come out faster?
Yes, yeah, the speed improvement was definitely what I wanted. And so like my first prototype, I didn't care about the CSS. I just like, if I dump the DOM, is it faster? And boy, was it. Yes.
So in this example, is there like an SVG element, and it's not SVG element, it's the whole web?
So the question is this an SVG? And this is actually a good example of using D3 to build HTML. So there's no SVGs here. If you look under the hood here, I'll blow that up for you a bit. Whoa. There's just, these are all divs with classes and some styles. And so you don't have to use SVGs. If especially for interactives, some interactive stuff, if you're going to be like clicking it and you want to like hyperlink, divs are a little bit easier than SVGs for that sort of stuff. And D3 works just fine. Just create elements bound to data. It's wonderful.
So do you assign your class nomenclature in your D3 as you're creating the different elements?
Yep.
And that correlates back to your setup?
Yes. So in the earlier example, it was the select all circle, and then it would create circles. For this, I would select all dot builds, and then create a div and class it. Assign a class of build in the enter. Yes.
Does it play well with frameworks like React?
Does it play well with frameworks like React? I've used it. It's actually currently embedded in Polymer, and that works fine. React, I think it would work well as well. You only run into problems if there's like I'd work a little bit with Polymer because there's shady DOM and shadow DOM where it's this styling, darn CSS will sometimes get in the way. But I have no reason to suspect that it would not play well with those because especially because that first select you can tell it this is where the visualization is, and then hopefully that's out of your frameworks not stepping on their toes. Is there a question in the middle?
Yeah, your interactive stuff here is, I'm guessing, not something that's native to D3. For handling your modals and things like that, you're just.
Yep. So D3 will allow me to easily bind to the clicks events. So then the on click, triggers. I think it seems to have frozen up on me. But yeah, so D3 allows me to handle the click, and then that's bound to an arbitrary function, and then I just pull up a Polymer Modal thing using that. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all for your interest and questions.